Part 2, The Unpredictable Intervention. The arrival of the human vessel. The human vessel, dubbed the Improbable, was anything but standard. It looked like it had been assembled from spare parts, with jury-rigged communication arrays and technology that defied known laws of physics. As it entered the Kilo conflict zone, the Krell and Voth battle fleets, bristling with weaponry capable of obliterating entire planetary systems, turned their attention to this unexpected intruder. The Krell command ships, with their hyper-advanced sensory arrays, scanned the vessel, expecting a threat. Instead, they were met with something far more perplexing. The bizarre transmission. Without warning, the Improbable began broadcasting. But this was no ordinary transmission. It was a chaotic mix of vintage Earth comedy routines, mathematical theorems presented through interpretive dance, quantum mechanics explained via puppet shows, and a cooking tutorial involving something called deep-fried butter. The Krell and Voth fleets, trained for war and diplomacy, were utterly unprepared for this onslaught of absurdity. The Krell command ships froze, their strategic algorithms unable to process the bizarre content. The Voth defense platforms experienced what could only be described as a collective technological existential crisis. For the first time in centuries, the two fleets were united, not in conflict, but in sheer bewilderment. The hidden solution. Buried within the chaotic transmission was a solution to the Kilo territorial dispute. The humans had discovered a mathematical error in the original claims of both the Krell and Voth civilizations. The solution was so elegantly simple that it made the previous 2,117 cycles of conflict seem like an elaborate form of collective stupidity. The humans presented their findings not through formal diplomatic channels but through a stand-up comedy routine about airline food, followed by a complex explanation of non-Euclidean geometry. The Krell and Voth delegations, still reeling from the absurdity of the transmission, were forced to confront the truth: their centuries-long conflict was based on a mistake. The humans had not only solved the dispute but had done so in a way that left both sides too embarrassed to continue fighting. The Council's reaction. Meanwhile, the Galactic Collaborative Council was in chaos. Reports of the human intervention had reached the Council chambers, and representatives from all 183 species were scrambling to make sense of what had happened. The Zorn Confederacy, known for their meticulous planning, presented a 247-chart risk assessment that essentially boiled down to one conclusion: humans were unpredictable to the point of being dangerous. The Quantum Diplomatic Corps representative, a being composed of living mathematical equations, attempted to analyze the human intervention using computational models. The result was a series of probability matrices that looked like they had been designed by a caffeine-addicted comedian. The Voth delegation, still processing the resolution of their conflict, expressed their frustration in a 17-page addendum that would become legendary in diplomatic circles. The Council's dilemma. The Council was faced with a dilemma. On one hand, the humans had solved a conflict that had eluded resolution for over 2,000 cycles. On the other hand, their methods were so unconventional that they threatened the very foundations of galactic diplomacy. The Council's carefully constructed bureaucratic structures were designed to manage predictable, rational behavior. Humans, with their chaotic creativity and disregard for established protocols, were a wild card that no amount of risk assessment could fully comprehend. The emergency session. The Council convened an emergency session to address the human intervention. The chamber, a marvel of technological integration, was filled with holographic displays cascading data streams so complex that entire civilizations could rise and fall between their algorithmic fluctuations. Representatives from each species took the floor, each presentation more absurd than the last. The Universal Linguistic Preservation Committee noted with growing alarm the humans' ability to communicate complex mathematical and diplomatic concepts through what could only be described as comedic performance art. The Xenobiological Research Consortium compiled preliminary reports suggesting that human communication methods defied every known model of interspecies interaction. The realization. As the deliberations continued, a profound realization began to crystallize. The council was not just discussing a single incident, they were confronting a fundamental threat to their understanding of conflict, innovation, and intelligent interaction. Humans were not just another species to be managed, they were a force of nature that defied traditional understanding. The stage was set for a decision that would change the course of galactic history. The council, faced with the unpredictable brilliance of humanity, would soon make a choice that would be remembered as one of the most spectacularly misguided administrative decisions in galactic history. Part 4: The Unanimous Decision. The aftermath of the vote. The Galactic Collaborative Council's decision to restrict humans from combat and diplomatic roles was met with a mix of relief and unease. For the Council, it was a desperate attempt to regain control over a species that had proven to be utterly unpredictable. For the rest of the galaxy, it was a moment of collective bewilderment. How could a species so young, so chaotic, and so seemingly irrational have upended centuries of established protocols? The Human Containment Protocol, as it came to be known, was a masterpiece of bureaucratic self-delusion. Thousands of words were drafted, detailing restrictions, monitoring procedures, and contingency plans. The document was a testament to the Council's desperation, a futile attempt to impose order on a force of nature. The Council's misguided belief. The Council believed that by restricting humans, they could contain their unpredictability. They were wrong. Humans, with their boundless creativity and disregard for limitations, saw the restrictions not as barriers but as challenges. The more the Council tried to control them, the more humans demonstrated their ability to circumvent, adapt, and innovate. The Quantum Diplomatic Corps, tasked with creating a comprehensive predictive model of human behavior, found themselves in a computational nightmare. Their most advanced processing systems crashed, overwhelmed by the sheer unpredictability of human actions. The final report, a 94% nonsensical gibberish, concluded with a single line: probability of humans following these restrictions effectively, 0. The humans' response. Humans, for their part, were largely unaware of the Council's decision. They were too busy solving another impossible problem, this time involving a collapsing star system and a species of sentient fungi. The human vessel, the improbable, had once again defied all expectations, using a combination of quantum mechanics, interpretive dance, and a recipe for banana bread to stabilize the star system. When news of the Council's decision finally reached them, the humans responded with characteristic humor. "They think they can contain us," one human engineer quipped, as they adjusted the settings on a device that defied all known laws of physics. "That's adorable." The Council's growing frustration. The Council, meanwhile, was growing increasingly frustrated. Every attempt to predict or control human behavior ended in failure. Their risk assessment models, once the pride of the galactic bureaucracy, were now a laughingstock. The Zorn Confederacy's representative, their crystalline form flickering with frustration, presented a 500-page report that essentially boiled down to one conclusion: humans are impossible to predict, and we have no idea what to do about it. The Voth delegation, still reeling from the resolution of their centuries-long conflict, expressed their frustration in a series of increasingly convoluted addendums. The Krell, traditionally known for their aggressive posturing, were unusually subdued, their usual displays of technological superiority rendered obsolete by human ingenuity. The Cosmic Chuckle. As the Council struggled to contain the humans, the universe itself seemed to be laughing. The cosmic background radiation, a constant hum of energy left over from the Big Bang, seemed to carry a faint chuckle, a sound that resonated with the pure, unbridled potential of a species that refused to be defined by anyone's limitations but its own. The final realization. Years later, historians and diplomatic scholars would study this moment. They would write countless dissertations, compile extensive research, and generate complex analytical models. And they would all come to the same fundamental conclusion: the day the Galactic Collaborative Council voted to restrict humans was the day they truly demonstrated how little they understood about the nature of human potential. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor, and humans were its favorite punchline. Part 1: The Galactic Council's Dilemma. The bureaucratic marvel of the Galactic Collaborative Council. The Galactic Collaborative Council was a marvel of interstellar bureaucracy. Comprising 183 sentient species from across the galaxy, it prided itself on its ability to regulate, categorize, and marginalize any potential threat to its carefully maintained status quo. The Council's chambers were a testament to the art of diplomatic excess, with holographic displays cascading data streams so complex that entire civilizations could rise and fall between their algorithmic fluctuations. Representatives from each species sat in a circular configuration, a spatial metaphor that suggested equality while subtly highlighting the hierarchical nature of galactic politics. The underestimation of humanity. Humans, however, were not supposed to be a threat. Emerging from a single unremarkable planet in an outer spiral arm of the Milky Way, they were viewed with a mixture of bemused condescension and mild irritation. The Zorn Confederacy, a collection of silicon-based life forms known for their meticulous planning, had filed an extensive report classifying humans as unpredictable chaos vectors. Their 12,000-page document, complete with holographic risk assessments and probability matrices, concluded that humans were dangerous precisely because they didn't follow any known rules of engagement, diplomacy, or rational behavior. The Kilo-Territorial Dispute. The Council's underestimation of humanity was about to be challenged by a series of events centered around the Kilo-Territorial Dispute. This conflict, simmering for over 2,117 standard galactic cycles, was a slow-burning powder keg of potential total war. The dispute centered around a strategically insignificant cluster of resource-poor asteroid systems that, by all rational calculation, should have been ignored. Yet, both the Krell and Voth civilizations had invested entire planetary economies into maintaining their claims, transforming what should have been a minor territorial disagreement into a centuries-long standoff. The human intervention. Enter the humans. They arrived with all the subtlety of a quantum singularity crashing a tea party. The intervention began not with grand warships or complex diplomatic missives but with what could only be described as the most spectacularly unconventional peace negotiation in recorded galactic history. The human vessel, a patchwork of spare parts and jury-rigged technology, began broadcasting a seemingly random compilation of vintage Earth comedy routines, mathematical theorems presented through interpretive dance, and a cooking tutorial involving something called deep-fried butter. The Council's emergency meeting. As the Krell and Voth battle fleets faced each other in a tense standoff, the human transmission disarmed them not through force but through sheer absurdity. The Krell command ships, with their hyper-advanced sensory arrays, froze as their strategic algorithms failed to process the bizarre broadcast. The Voth defense platforms experienced a collective technological existential crisis. And buried within the transmission was a solution to the territorial dispute so elegantly simple that it made the previous 2,117 cycles of conflict seem like an elaborate form of collective stupidity. The Council, unaware of the unfolding events, was already scheduling an emergency meeting. Diplomatic channels were humming with encrypted communications, planetary research teams were being mobilized, and at the center of it all was a group of humans who would once again prove that the most dangerous thing in the universe is human creativity coupled with an absolute disregard for the word impossible. Part 3: The Council's Panic. The Chamber of Chaos. The Galactic Collaborative Council's emergency session chamber was a cacophony of confusion. Holographic displays flickered with data streams so dense that they resembled abstract art more than actionable intelligence. Representatives from 183 species were in a state of collective bewilderment, their usual diplomatic poise replaced by frantic gestures and raised voices. The humans had done it again, solved an impossible problem in the most absurd way imaginable, and the Council was scrambling to respond. The Zorn Confederacy's representative, a crystalline being whose molecular structure shifted with each emotional fluctuation, took the floor first. Their voice, a precisely modulated sound wave calibrated to convey maximum disapproval, echoed through the chamber. Esteemed council members, they began, we are confronting an unprecedented breach of every known diplomatic protocol. The recent human intervention in the Kilo conflict represents not just a violation of established procedures but a fundamental existential threat to the carefully constructed balance of galactic interactions. The Quantum Diplomatic Corps breakdown. The Quantum Diplomatic Corps representative, a being composed of living mathematical equations, attempted to analyze the human intervention using computational models. The result was a series of probability matrices that looked like they had been designed by a caffeine-addicted comedian. Our preliminary computational models, the representative intoned, their voice a melodic series of mathematical equations, suggest a 37% probability of successful conflict resolution through the methods employed. And yet, empirical evidence contradicts our most sophisticated predictive algorithms. The Voth delegation, still processing the resolution of their centuries-long conflict, presented a study in collective existential confusion. Their representative, a being with multiple tentacular appendages, twitched with a mixture of grudging relief and bureaucratic indignation. The mathematical correction they proposed, the Voth representative began, their voice a complex harmonic that suggested layers of emotional complexity, while technically sound, completely disregards 2,117 cycles of established territorial negotiation processes. It is unacceptably efficient. The Krell's uncharacteristic subduedness. The Krell delegation, traditionally known for their aggressive posturing and elaborate displays of technological superiority, looked deflated. Their usual method of conflict resolution, which typically involved intricate displays of weaponry and thinly veiled threats, had been rendered entirely obsolete by what amounted to a cosmic comedy routine mixed with applied mathematics. The Krell representative, a towering figure clad in battle armor, stood silently, their usual bravado replaced by a look of profound confusion. The Xenobiological Research Consortium's report. The Xenobiological Research Consortium presented a comprehensive analysis of human behavior that only deepened the Council's collective confusion. Humans, their report began, demonstrate a fundamental inability to recognize established procedural limitations. Their problem-solving methodology appears to deliberately circumvent all known logical frameworks. Communication strategies involve what could only be described as weaponized absurdity. One particularly memorable passage suggested that human creativity should be classified as a form of quantum uncertainty, a force that could not be predicted, contained, or fully understood. The Universal Linguistic Preservation Committee noted with growing alarm the human's ability to communicate complex mathematical and diplomatic concepts through what could only be described as performative chaos. The Council's collective realization. As the deliberations continued, a profound realization began to crystallize. The Council was not just discussing a single incident, they were confronting a fundamental threat to their understanding of conflict, innovation, and intelligent interaction. Humans were not just another species to be managed, they were a force of nature that defied traditional understanding. The Zorn Confederacy's risk assessment models began to short-circuit, their complex computational matrices unable to process the sheer improbability of the humans' approach. Holographic displays flickered and warped, presenting probability scenarios that looked like they had been designed by a quantum physicist suffering from an acute caffeine overdose. The voting process begins. The Council, faced with the unpredictable brilliance of humanity, decided to take action. The voting process was not merely an administrative procedure, it was a cosmic performance art piece, a bureaucratic ballet of unprecedented complexity. Each representative approached the quantum-entangled voting interface with a mixture of trepidation, frustration, and an underlying current of existential bewilderment. The Zorn Confederacy's representative initiated the proceedings, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns that suggested internal computational processes so intricate that lesser species would have considered it a form of living mathematics. We cannot, the representative intoned, their voice carrying the weight of centuries of bureaucratic reluctance, allow such unpredictability to persist unchecked. The Quantum Diplomatic Corps' vote. The Quantum Diplomatic Corps representative followed, their very existence a walking contradiction composed of living mathematical equations. Their vote emerged as a complex quantum state that simultaneously represented yes, no, maybe, and absolutely not, a linguistic and mathematical feat that would be studied by communication theorists for millennia to come. The Voth's 17-page addendum. The Voth delegation's approach was particularly noteworthy. When they cast their vote, it came accompanied by a 17-page addendum that would become legendary in diplomatic circles. The document, so densely constructed that entire research teams would spend decades attempting to decode its full implications, essentially boiled down to one profound observation: we have no idea how this happened, but mathematically speaking, it shouldn't have worked. The Council's unanimous decision. As the votes were recorded, a profound silence descended upon the chamber. This was more than a diplomatic decision. This was a collective acknowledgement of a fundamental shift in the galactic ecosystem. The final tally emerged with a level of unanimity that was unprecedented in the Council's history: 183 species, 183 votes. The decision was clear: humans were to be restricted from direct combat and diplomatic intervention roles. The Human Containment Protocol. The official resolution, when drafted, became a masterpiece of bureaucratic self-delusion. Thousands of words essentially boiled down to one simple statement: we have no idea how to deal with these beings, so we're going to pretend we can control them. Diplomatic archives would later record this moment as the Human Containment Protocol, a name that would be remembered as one of the most spectacularly misguided administrative decisions in galactic history. The Cosmic Chuckle. As the resolution was officially entered into galactic records, something remarkable happened: nothing. Absolutely nothing changed. Humans continued to exist, to innovate, to solve problems in ways that defied comprehension. Years later, historians and diplomatic scholars would study this moment, and they would all come to the same fundamental conclusion: the day the Galactic Collaborative Council voted to restrict humans was the day they truly demonstrated how little they understood about the nature of human potential.